Three black SUVs pulled up to my driveway. Men in dark suits got out. Karen stood across the street, smiling like she just won the lottery. She thought she exposed a criminal. What she didn't know was that she had just called the FBI on a global science experiment. It started as something simple. A weekend project, really. I had just finished assembling a precision radio antenna on my rooftop, tall, sleek, designed for deep space frequency reception. Nothing illegal. Nothing even particularly unusual, at least to anyone familiar with science. But this neighborhood wasn't familiar with science. It was familiar with gossip, with rules, and with Karen. From the moment the antenna stood above the shingles, I knew I'd drawn attention. First, it was glances from behind curtains. Then came the slow-driving cars past my house. One morning, I caught Karen standing at the edge of her lawn, hands on hips, staring up at it like it was a missile silo. "Excuse me," she barked one day as I was checking signal calibration from the driveway. "What exactly is that thing? Because it looks very suspicious." I explained calmly, politely. I told her it was a part of a university-partnered research experiment monitoring atmospheric and cosmic radio signals. I even offered to show her documentation. But she didn't want documentation. "I don't care what you say," she snapped. "This is a residential area, not Area 51. Later that week, I got an email from the HOA. It was a formal notice about an unauthorized structure. They attached a blurry photo of the antenna taken from the sidewalk, probably by Karen. They cited bylaws about architectural harmony and aesthetic disruptions, none of which legally applied. But they used them anyway. I sent them the specs, the university partnership documents, FCC compliance reports, even the HOA clause that clearly allowed functional antennas below a certain height, which mine was. They didn't respond right away. Instead, Karen escalated. I overheard her in the street telling neighbors that I was harvesting data or listening in on people. One evening, I saw her with a small camcorder filming my house from inside her SUV, whispering like she was narrating a spy documentary. The strangest part, her rumors started catching on. My next-door neighbor asked me if it affected TV signals. Another asked if it was safe for pets. A few people stopped waving hello. Then came the nonsense about interference. Karen claimed her garage door was malfunctioning and blamed my antenna. She said her baby monitor picked up foreign voices. It was absurd. None of her devices were even on the right bands. She made a scene at the next HOA meeting. Stormed in with a folder of printed photos, maps, and highlighted bylaws. "We need to act," she said. "We don't know who we're living next to." They didn't vote to remove the antenna. Not yet. But they sent another warning, this time with the words, "Pending further review." I stayed calm. I kept logging data and filing daily reports to the science network. The experiment was part of an international array mapping gamma ray bursts from distant galaxies. My antenna was node number 48 in a chain that stretched from Iceland to Australia. But none of that mattered to Karen. She wanted me gone, or at least shut down. One Thursday morning, I noticed something odd. A drone hovering near my backyard. It wasn't mine. Karen stood in her driveway with a tablet, controlling it like she was on a recon mission. I walked over and asked her to stop. She didn't even flinch. "If you've got nothing to hide," she said, "then what's the problem?" The next day, I noticed an SUV slowly drive by twice. Then again in the evening. Same model. Different plates. I had a bad feeling. This wasn't just HOA drama anymore. Something bigger was building. And I was right. Because 5 days later, the FBI knocked on my door. Karen wasn't just nosy, she was obsessed. After failing to get the antenna removed through the HOA, she took matters into her own hands. Every day, I noticed her watching. Sometimes from her living room window, sometimes while pretending to walk her dog. One afternoon, I caught her crouched behind her mailbox, holding up her phone, clearly recording me as I made adjustments to the antenna's alignment. I ignored it. I had more important things to focus on. The antenna had recently picked up a minor solar flare event, a promising signal for the global research team. I was preparing to transmit the data packet to the central database in Geneva when I noticed my internet connection lagging. Moments later, my doorbell rang. It was a city code inspector. Again. He stood awkwardly on my porch, holding a clipboard and frowning like he didn't really want to be there. He asked if he could inspect the structure due to new complaints. I sighed and welcomed him in, offering the same stack of documentation I'd shown the HOA. After a quick walkthrough and a glance at the equipment, he looked relieved. "This is the third complaint this week," he muttered. "We're not seeing anything wrong here. Honestly, this is the cleanest setup I've seen." He left without filing a violation. But Karen didn't stop. That evening, she posted a thread online titled "Neighbor or Spy?" It was filled with photos of my antenna, screenshots of Google Earth images, and outlandish captions about foreign satellites, suspicious transmissions, and possible threats to national security. The post went mildly viral in our local Facebook group. Some laughed. Others, unfortunately, took it seriously. Soon after, she began claiming that her phone was being monitored, that her Wi-Fi was being hijacked. She even blamed me when the streetlights flickered after a storm, saying my antenna must be messing with the grid. I tried to stay out of it, but things escalated fast. One night, at around 11 p.m., I saw flashing lights through the blinds. I peeked outside. 2 police cars were parked out front. A knock followed. I opened the door, greeted by an officer who seemed more embarrassed than concerned. "Sorry to bother you," he said. "We received a call about radio terrorism." He made air quotes with his fingers. I blinked. "You're kidding." "No, sir. But we're not here to arrest anyone. Just checking it out." I let them in. I showed them the equipment, the research papers, the frequency logs. One of the officers actually seemed fascinated. "This is cool stuff," he said. "Like SETI, right?" I smiled, relieved someone got it. They left, apologizing for the disturbance. But Karen watched from across the street, arms folded, convinced she was right. Then she crossed a line. I found out later she submitted a formal tip to the FBI. Not just an email, but a full report through their public suspicious activity portal. She included my address, photos of the antenna, timestamps, and even a grainy video clip of me typing at my desk at night. The tipping point came 3 days later. I pulled into my driveway after a grocery run and saw them. 3 unmarked black SUVs idling along the curb. Men in dark suits stepped out, one of them adjusting a communication earpiece. Karen stood at the edge of her lawn, practically glowing with satisfaction. She had her phone out, recording again, whispering into the camera, "They're here. I knew it. They're finally going to shut him down." I froze, groceries in hand. One of the agents approached. Calm, professional, but serious. "Sir, may we speak with you about your equipment?" I nodded, my heart pounding, unsure whether to feel afraid or insulted. I led them inside. They didn't rush. They asked questions, specific ones, about power output, frequency range, bandwidth use. These weren't amateurs. They knew what they were talking about. I answered everything truthfully, even showed them my license from the FCC, the partnership letter from the International Research Lab, the experiment timeline. One agent made a call. It was short, clipped, technical. Then, just like that, the tone changed. The agent who had led the group stepped outside. Karen was still filming. He walked straight up to her, leaned down slightly, and said, clear enough for anyone nearby to hear, "Ma'am, this antenna is part of an authorized, university-backed, international scientific collaboration. It is not illegal. It is not surveillance. And your repeated reports could be classified as interference with a federal operation." She froze. The smug expression vanished. The video she took never made it online. But the moment went viral anyway. The silence after the agents left was louder than the confrontation itself. Karen had retreated inside her house without saying a word. The SUVs pulled away, leaving tire marks on the street like ghost trails. I stood in my living room for a long time, still holding the signed copy of the official verification form they'd handed me. It confirmed that my antenna was listed in the Global Science Initiative, an international cooperative backed by scientific agencies and observatories around the world. I didn't feel vindicated. Not yet. I felt exhausted. Because even though the FBI agents had cleared everything, I knew Karen wouldn't let this go. That evening, the neighborhood message board lit up with questions. People had seen the agents. They'd seen Karen pacing, heard the arguments. Some asked if there was a raid. Others guessed I was under surveillance. A few even said I should move for everyone's peace of mind. I posted once. "Come, Sure. I explained that the visit was part of a verification protocol for a scientific network I volunteered with. I attached a public link to the research. No drama. No accusations. Still, by the next day, Karen had launched a new theory. According to her, I had convinced the FBI not to investigate, that I was high level and untouchable. She began referring to me as the radio man in conversations, like I was some comic book villain broadcasting secrets into the sky. But something unexpected happened. Not everyone believed her anymore. A few neighbors reached out privately to apologize. One man, Peter, who lived 2 streets over, even asked if his daughter, an undergrad studying physics, could come see the equipment. I said yes. She visited that Saturday. Her eyes lit up as I explained how the antenna worked, how it gathered cosmic data, how the project connected hundreds of people around the world in a silent collaboration to understand the universe. She asked questions no one else had asked. Smart ones. The next day, she posted a short video on her university's science page about the visit. Just a few clips. No names. No locations. But it spread fast. Within a week, the video had racked up thousands of views. The comments were full of support, curiosity, excitement. People loved that something so advanced was happening in an ordinary American neighborhood. I got a message from one of the university leads. They thanked me for staying involved despite the local pressure. They invited me to speak virtually on a panel about public science outreach. Then came the local news van. A reporter showed up asking if I'd be willing to do a short piece on the antenna, the science, and what had happened. I hesitated, but then I thought of Karen's lies, the fear she'd stirred, and the silence that followed. So I agreed. The segment aired that Friday. It was short, 3 minutes, but powerful. They showed clips of the antenna against a blue sky, footage of cosmic rays visualized on a screen, and a few lines from my interview where I explained why this work mattered. They even used the quote I ended with. We live in neighborhoods, but we're part of something bigger. This antenna looks up, not in. Karen's face when she saw the news crew filming on my lawn was unforgettable. Her curtain twitched, but she didn't come outside. That night, the HOA president called. He asked if I'd be willing to do a presentation for the community. Not an apology. Not a demand. A genuine request. He said it might help people feel informed and maybe inspired. I agreed. The event was set for the following Thursday in the community clubhouse. Flyers went out. Karen ripped down the first few. But more kept showing up. By the time the day arrived, every seat in the room was full. I stood in front of my neighbors with nothing but a small projector and a tablet. No defenses. No fear. I told them the truth. What the antenna did. Why it mattered. How our little suburb was a pinprick on a global map of discovery. And I told them what had happened without naming names and how easy it was for fear to become louder than facts. When I finished, something I didn't expect happened. They clapped. Longer than they needed to. A few people stood. One man, who had earlier supported Karen, came up and shook my hand. A teenager asked if she could volunteer to help me log data. Even the HOA president said he talked to legal counsel about updating the guidelines to better accommodate scientific equipment. Karen didn't attend, but she saw the photos. She saw the news coverage, and she saw the sign posted at the clubhouse the next morning. Tonight's speaker helped bring the stars a little closer to our street. Just when I thought things had settled, a new problem emerged, not from Karen, but from higher up. A formal-looking envelope appeared in my mailbox, this time from the county zoning office. Inside was a notice stating my property was under review for non-residential activity that may exceed local code limitations. I stood there on the porch, stunned. Karen wasn't calling the cops anymore. She'd taken her campaign to the county level. I called the office, thinking it had to be a mistake. The woman on the phone said they'd received a packet of information from a concerned resident, including photos, maps, and what she described as confusing legal claims. I asked if the antenna violated any codes. She paused and said, "That's what we're trying to figure out." The review meant a temporary hold on any upgrades I had planned. I couldn't even adjust the angle of the dish without risking further complaint. For a project that depended on global timing and precise synchronization, this was a real setback. The funny part was, the more people who tried to shut me down, the more attention the experiment received. A national science blog picked up the story. The headline read, "Cosmic Research Meets Small-Town Resistance. One Man's Backyard is Changing the Sky." I didn't expect what came next. Emails started flooding in from radio operators, students, scientists, and even people in other countries who had seen the segment online. Some offered technical advice. Others just sent encouragement. A team in Japan even sent me a signed certificate welcoming me as an honorary partner node in their Deep Sky monitoring group. But not everyone was supportive. Karen posted again, this time in a fringe local newsletter she somehow managed to distribute to dozens of mailboxes. The front page screamed, "Spy hardware hidden in our neighborhood." Next to it, she pasted a grainy photo of me from one of the HOA meetings and the antenna looming behind my house like some kind of villain's tower. It should have been laughable. But it wasn't. Because even though more people were on my side now, fear spreads faster than truth. Some neighbors pulled back again. One family moved their kids' playhouse further from our shared fence. Another started parking across the street, like being next to my house was risky. Then came the night I got the knock on the door I hadn't expected. It was one of the FBI agents. Not in a suit this time. He wore jeans and a jacket, and he didn't come in an SUV. Just a regular car. He looked different. More relaxed. He introduced himself again, this time using his first name, Michael. He asked if I had a minute to talk. I let him in. He told me that while my setup had been cleared, the agency had noticed the story catching attention online. They had no issue with what I was doing. But they were aware that certain groups, less friendly ones, had taken interest in the citizen science network I was part of. I felt a chill run through me. He reassured me. "You're not in trouble," he said. "But what you're doing is more important than you realize. And now more visible." He told me to be cautious. Not paranoid. Just smart. To keep logs, document any unusual behavior, and to contact his office if anything felt wrong. Before he left, he looked at the antenna through the window and said something I'll never forget. "You're part of something big. Bigger than Karen, bigger than this town." Most people don't even realize how close they are to something historic until it's already happened. After he left, I stood in the quiet and stared at the antenna. It had never looked more still, or more important. 2 days later, the zoning office completed their review. The letter I received simply said, "No violations found. Case closed." I walked outside, letter in hand, and pinned it to the HOA bulletin board myself. Karen saw me do it. She didn't speak. She just stood there, staring, lips tight, arms crossed. And then she turned and walked away. Not a word. Not a threat. Just silence. For the first time in weeks, she didn't look victorious. She looked small. Weeks passed, and the noise finally faded. Karen didn't call the city again. No more flyers appeared. No more strange complaints or sudden inspections. It was like the storm had passed, and in its wake, everything was a little quieter, but not the same. The antenna stood tall against the blue sky, humming gently with data that crossed borders, oceans, time zones. For the first time since I'd installed it, I didn't feel like I had to justify its presence. My neighbors began to wave again. Some even asked questions. Curious ones. Thoughtful ones. Peter's daughter came by regularly to help with the data logging. She brought her laptop and notes, and the two of us would sit in the garage turn lab checking readings and making entries. It was quiet work, but meaningful. She told me she wanted to pursue astrophysics now, not just because of the stars, but because of what the whole experience had taught her about standing firm when people try to silence you. One evening, there was a knock at the door. I opened it, and to my surprise, Karen stood there. No phone. No help. Just her. She looked tired. Not angry. Not smug. Just drained. "I wanted to return this," she said quietly, holding out a small binder. It was one of the early flyers I'd made about the science project, something I'd passed around long before the conflict began. She must have kept it. I didn't reach for it. She looked at the binder, then back at me. "I thought I was protecting the neighborhood," she said. "I really believed that. But I was wrong." There was a long pause. "I saw the latest article," she added. "The one about the satellite relay you helped catch. That signal, They said without your node, the window would have closed. She was referring to the latest success. A solar particle burst had caused a deviation in one of the data streams the international team was tracking. My antenna had picked up the anomaly, and because of the real-time relay I'd established, the network adjusted in time. The story had been featured in Scientific Today, and a few mainstream outlets picked it up too. It was the kind of recognition the project had never expected, and it placed our neighborhood's humble node in the spotlight. I nodded but didn't gloat. Karen stood there awkwardly. Anyway, she said, I wanted you to know. I'm stepping down from the HOA. I didn't ask her why. I didn't need to. She left the binder on my porch and walked away. That night, I stood outside and looked up. The antenna pointed toward a quiet patch of sky. Somewhere out there, hundreds of others like mine were doing the same thing, collecting whispers from space, building a picture of something bigger than any one of us could ever see alone. A notification buzzed on my phone. A new ping from the project. The next calibration event was happening in under 10 hours, and my node was one of the primaries. I smiled, powered up the system, and ran diagnostics. In the stillness of the room, the screens came alive, data streams dancing, satellites blinking in pattern, energy measurements from across continents syncing like clockwork. The neighborhood had moved on. The fear had passed. And in its place, something else had grown, curiosity maybe, or respect. Maybe just peace. The next community event was scheduled for the park. Peter's daughter was giving a short talk about space weather and how it could affect power grids and satellites. She invited me to say a few words at the end. When I stepped up to the mic, I looked out at the faces, some familiar, some new. I kept it simple. You don't have to understand everything that happens in your backyard. But sometimes, if you listen carefully, you might just hear the universe speaking. They clapped. Not out of politeness, but with genuine warmth. And somewhere behind the crowd, Karen stood. Not in front. Not in the center. Just among the people. Listening. For once, she didn't look angry. She looked human. And that was enough.